Congressman Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, to Fox News Sunday, there's been some breaking news I want to ask you about. An Air France jetliner from Paris to Mauritius was diverted and had to land in Kenya. You can see it right there. They found something suspicious in the lavatory, and we're investigating to see whether or not it was a bomb. So far, no sign that it was, but your reaction to that and other bomb threats?
This is really one of the most foremost threats that we face, and one we're deeply concerned about, and that is American airplanes. This was not in this case, but American airplanes originating in foreign airports. That bomb that took down that Russian airliner may have been the size of a soda can. And that bomb killed more people than all the Paris attackers combined. So this is still a grave threat. That is to ready access to foreign airports where American planes may be. We still have a problem here in this country of access to airports and airplanes.
You're talking about the back door where airport workers and
it looks like that's what was involved in the downing of that Russian plane in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. So this is a grave concern, and clearly Air France took the right precaution in bringing this plane to rest and examining the contents.
I also want to ask you about the comment we've been discussing this morning. Hillary Clinton in last night's debate saying we are now where we need to be in the fight against ISIS.
Well, this was in the context of, do we go after Assad or do we go after ISIS? Can we do both? And her answer is basically we need to do both. And now for the first time we have a political process at the United Nations that ought to bring about an end to both. And I think she's right. I think it isn't enough to leave Assad in place, because as long as he is there, there is going to be a recruiting magnet for ISIS.
But Congressman, there's no agreement. I mean, yes, they're talking about we're going to have talks, but the Russians have not backed off Assad, and the Iranians have not backed off Assad.
No, you're absolutely right. But the first step has got to be sitting around the table and agreeing to a process to get to the end result. The Russians are going to come to that. So I think they're coming to that conclusion as we speak, because the facts on the ground are not improving at the pace they thought they would. Notwithstanding all of their indiscriminate bombing, notwithstanding all the negotiation with the Iranians, they are making very little progress on the ground. So that conflict now, I think, is posing a real problem, an albatross for Putin. So he's going to be looking for a resolution. The Iranians are the tough ones to persuade. But at the end of the day, unless Iran and Russia want to have a rump Alawite state and a rump Sunni state and a Kurdish state, then they're going to have to come to the table and bring about an end to this regime.
You criticized President Obama after his Oval Office address a couple of weeks ago, saying if you're going to speak to the nation, you have to bring something new. Here's what President Obama said this week.
We are hitting ISIL harder than ever. Coalition aircraft, our fighters, bombers, and drones have been increasing the pace of airstrikes.
Question, are you satisfied with the pace of progress? Are you satisfied that President Obama is doing everything he should to fight ISIS?
I think the president has the overall right strategy and has been right to resist bringing in massive numbers of American troops. Look, the Iraqis would love to have Americans die for Iraq, and the Syrians would love to have Americans die for Syria, and the Gulf states are happy for us to fight and die. That's good for everybody but the Americans fighting and dying. At the same time, while the broad outlines of what the president wants to do, I think the right ones, it's not going fast enough. The pace is not going fast enough. I think we have to look for something to change the dynamic on the ground. And for me, that would be in the form of a safe zone or a buffer zone or a no-fly zone, something that can end the refugee flows, something that can give us space and time to train up forces to take on ISIS. But I'm just concerned that as long as this caliphate exists, provides this magnet for radicalization, and we're likely to see more attacks like we have seen in San Bernardino and elsewhere, and that's the concern I have over pace.
Well, I want to pick up on that, because you say, as you just said here, the president should set up a safe zone, a no-fly zone in Syria. The president rejects that. This week, Defense Secretary Ash Carter said that he has at least raised the idea of Apache attack helicopters and sending in Special Ops ground forces onto the front lines to aid the Arabs who are fighting in Iraq. President rejects that as well. He's not picking up the pace.
Well, the Iraqis have rejected that. The Iraqis, I think, are too much under the thumb of the Iranians. Well, the president's not willing to send in Apaches and spotters if the Iraqis say they don't want them, and if it means that these Shia mobilization forces are going to be going after and trying to kill Americans. I don't think that makes sense. But I do think the administration ought to re-examine the idea of establishing safe zones. I think they ought to put that front and center in this UN negotiation, because I think it does have the potential of really changing the battlefield conditions, and they have been stalemated for too long. Now, we've been hearing about the retake of Ramadi for a long time. I hope it happens. I hope it's imminent. But if the past is precedent, then that's still going to take a very long time. And I'm concerned the clock is ticking, and the danger to the American people is still very present.
Well, let's talk about American people, and let's talk specifically about that couple that launched the terror attack in San Bernardino that killed 14 Americans. As you look back now, and as the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, was there an intelligence failure, or at least were there things that we should have been able to pick up before the attack that we failed to pick up?
You know, Chris, that is exactly the question that we're studying, and that is, what can we learn from this? What did we do wrong? What did we miss? And I have to tell you, at this point, we don't have the answer. I wish I could say, you know, if only we had done this, we could have stopped the attack. But the takeaway from San Bernardino at the end of the day may be that out there in the country right now, we have investigations in all 50 states, who are at a similar stage of radicalization, and there are family members who know it, there are friends who know it, and unless they step forward and say something, it may be impossible to prevent another attack like this. So we really can't rely solely on law enforcement or the intelligence community. There aren't always going to be signs that they see.
But I want to pick up on that, because one of the things that we learned, which I have to say was a tremendous surprise to me and I think a lot of people, is that the government does not routinely search the social media histories of people who want to come into this country. Fiancé visas, any other kind of visas, refugees. Now, it turns out it was misreported, and that Tashfeen Malik, the woman in this case, whatever she said, she did it privately, not on public social media. But we don't even search the public media, and one of the reasons is the Department of Homeland Security reportedly doesn't do it, is that they reportedly are concerned about civil liberties, which raises the question, if a foreigner wants to come in this country, should we be worried about their privacy, or should we be worried about protecting the homeland? We should be worried about protecting the homeland. I think that policy is changing, should change, and will change. Did you know that that was the case?
I did not know that that was the case, and I think this is going to have to change. If someone is brought in for an interview, for example, and is asked about their views on things, but has posted things that are completely contrary to the interview, frankly, I'd have much more faith in what they posted than what they say during the course of an interview. So we should be looking at that. I think we are going to be looking at that.
Is there a way we can, you know, because we're making a big point, well, she didn't do it publicly, but she did it in private messages. Is there a way that we could look at the private messages, and shouldn't we do that?
Well, there may be ways that we can look at the private messages. That depends on our technological capabilities and what platform they're using. And this will be the whole issue of encryption. If they're using encrypted platforms, then the answer is probably no. We're not in a position to look for them. But of course, you have to know what to look for, what platforms they may be using. And this is always going to be imperfect, and there is always going to be a risk. But we have to do what we can to narrow those risks, so we ought to be looking at that media.
Finally, we also found out this week that thousands of people who come into this country overstay their visas, and we don't know where they are now. That would seem, Congressman, like a huge security gap.
It's a huge gap in security. It's a huge problem we've had with our immigration system for many years, and that is a tremendous number of people come to the country legally, but overstay their visas. And there has to be a far stronger mechanism for being able to track down people that have overstayed their visas, to have a responsibility for who they're coming to visit or stay with, so that there is some accountability. We have a lot of work to do on that, Chris.
Congressman Schiff, thank you. Thanks for your time. Happy holidays, sir.
To you, too.
When we